Leo sat flat on the damp basement floor, a worn-out laptop on his lap. Caleb lay sprawled on a flattened foam mattress, while Ethan, leaning against the cold concrete wall, stared silently at the screen. The only light in the cramped room came from the monitor casting their grotesque shadows on the wall. "See this website?" Leo crossed his arms, his eyes glued to the screen showing his two friends something. "This isn't just some nonsense. I talked to a guy on a hidden forum. He said if you're willing to sacrifice a blood tie, the money will come within 7 days." "A blood tie?" Caleb repeated, laughing nervously. "Who are you talking about? A cousin we don't like." "No," Leo replied. "It doesn't have to be a person. It can be a symbol, an object, a memory. Anything that connects you to your old world." Ethan, who had been silent until now, slowly placed a small, worn, black, leather-bound book on the floor. The book had no title, no author's name, just soft leather that had faded with time. "I have something better," he whispered. "I bought it at an antique shop out of town. The owner said it had been in storage for a very long time." The other two looked at each other. "And how much did you pay for this joke?" Caleb asked. $50. He said this book was only for those who know what they want." Leo didn't hesitate to pick it up carefully, flipping through the pages. Inside shaky handwriting in reddish-brown ink appeared the Midnight Exchange. Just below it was a warning. A forbidden ritual for the uninitiated. He skimmed the first few pages, stopping at an underlined sentence. "The spirit will grant you what is commensurate with what it takes." A smile spread across Leo's lips, a dangerous, hungry smile. "Well then, we'll give it something and see what it gives us back." Leo came from a modest family. His father had left long ago and his mother worked tirelessly at a garment factory in another state. He was what the whole neighborhood called the kid who was supposed to make it. Graduating from university with an honors degree in finance, he had everything he needed to get started. But 3 years after graduation, he was selling phone accessories at a cyber shack and making extra money by cracking software to get by. Disappointment had gnawed at him from the inside. Excellence went unrewarded. Job interviews always had someone prearranged for the position. Internships didn't pay enough to cover rent. He was hungry. Hungry for money, for recognition, for a world that wouldn't keep telling him to try a little harder. He wanted to explode one day to become a millionaire, so everyone would have to shut up. Caleb's father was a retired factory worker, and his mother worked part-time at a donut shop. He grew up in a strict family. He was always the follower. Not because he was weak, but because he was afraid of being alone. Always there, always in the group, but never the leader. He dreamed in silence. He never dared to say what he truly wanted. Ethan, a quiet, mysterious, and introverted young man, was the shadow of the group. An orphan, he lived with his sister Sarah in their family home. He spoke little, rarely smiled, and seemed to be drawn to things that were mystical and ancient. The 3 young men arranged to meet again in a week at 11 p.m., in this very basement Leo's room, to perform the ritual. On the appointed day, Caleb and Ethan arrived at Leo's. Every second was precious. They had gathered the necessary items. 3 earthenware bowls filled with a dark liquid, a mixture of salt ash and a few drops of chicken blood bought from a butcher shop. A coarse rope braided from 3 locks of human hair they had stolen from a barber shop. And 3 personal offerings. Leo brought his mother's old silver locket. Caleb brought a baseball card of his deceased younger brother. Ethan brought a photograph of his sister Sarah. They arranged everything on the floor in a perfect triangle. Each bowl was placed in front of its owner with the rope in the center. "We start exactly at midnight," Ethan reminded them in a low voice. "And we open our eyes together after 10 minutes, just like the book says," Leo added. "Not a second sooner," Caleb insisted. "Absolutely not a second sooner." An alarm on Leo's phone was set to vibrate. Each of them carefully lit a white candle. Leo read the instructions written in red ink in the small black book in a whisper. "Place your hands on your knees, palms up. Close your eyes. Do not speak. Do not move. Do not look. If a candle goes out or moves, stop the ritual. If a bowl spills, empties, or shifts, stop the ritual. They closed their eyes. Their breathing slowed, their bodies tensed. The ritual had begun. Then slowly a gentle breeze swept through the room, though all the windows and doors were sealed shut. The candles began to crackle. Leo focused his eyes, still tightly shut. Ethan was motionless, his face seeming detached from time. But Caleb was trembling. His heart was beating too fast. Though he tried to keep his eyes shut, he felt a presence. Not the wind, not the air, but something alive right beside him. It was breathing, watching him. He could have sworn a finger had just brushed against his cheek. And then he heard it. A whisper right next to his ear, a strangled voice. "You called me. I have come." He couldn't resist. He opened his eyes. Leo's basement was still there, but everything seemed distorted. The walls seemed to stretch, the ceiling darkened. The bowl in front of him glowed as if it contained a liquid mirror. Despite his fear, Caleb leaned down to look. In the reflection, a figure stared back at him. It had no eyes, no nose, only a mouth. A wide, gaping mouth that was smiling. Caleb scrambled back in panic, but he didn't scream. He squeezed his eyes shut again, trying to convince himself he had seen nothing. At the stroke of midnight, the phone suddenly vibrated. It was the alarm. This time, all three young men opened their eyes together. The room was still there. The silence seemed to have returned, but the rope was now tied in a spiral around the three bowls. The three candles, though initially placed far apart, were now standing side by side, and in each bowl the liquid was no longer dark. It was the deep red of blood. They sat motionless, looking at each other without a word. What the hell?" Leo whispered. "I didn't open my eyes," Caleb swore hastily. Ethan was the first to break the circle, slowly standing up. He looked at the book in the corner, then at his two friends. "Someone broke the triangle. Who moved the candles?" No one answered. Caleb's palms were slick with sweat. He didn't dare look at the others. His eyes kept darting back to the bowl in front of him. He said nothing, showed nothing. But he knew. He had seen something, and something had seen him. Leo shot to his feet, his forehead beaded with sweat. "All right, this is a little weird, but we're still alive. Let's get some sleep. We'll see if money falls from the sky tomorrow." He tried to force a smile. No one responded. Caleb, trembling, continued to stare at the bowl as if something was about to crawl out of it. I'm going home," he mumbled. "You're going to walk alone at this hour," Leo snapped. "Want to end up on the morning news?" "I don't want to stay here." Caleb stumbled to his feet, grabbed his backpack, and rushed out without another word. He didn't even close the door behind him. Ethan remained standing, his eyes fixed on the coiled rope now placed neatly in a corner of the basement. "Are you okay?" Leo asked. Ethan whispered. "It came through the circle. Someone let it in." What the hell are you talking about?" But Ethan didn't answer. Leo was about to tell him to get some sleep when the basement door slammed shut. There was no draft, just a dry bang. A chill ran down Leo's spine. "Ethan, stop messing around." But Ethan didn't reply. He had sat down, and in his hands he was holding the earthenware bowl. He looked at it as one would admire a treasure. The sun had risen, but for the three of them, this new day was anything but normal. Ethan arrived home in silence. As for Leo, he woke up with a strained smile on his face. He walked down the street, headphones on his mind, filled with doubts and fragile hopes. When he got to the cyber shack, he found a brown envelope placed right under the glass counter, exactly where he usually kept his phone cases. He opened it and found crisp new $100 bills neatly stacked, a total of $10,000. He couldn't understand it. This was the most money he had ever held in his hands. As for Ethan, as quiet as ever. He tidied up his room that morning. While rearranging his small bookshelf, he found an old rusty iron box sealed with a frayed leather strap. It belonged to his father, who had passed away 10 years ago. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside were thick stacks of cash, the bills still smelling of fresh ink. He counted. Exactly $10,000. Meanwhile, Caleb hadn't left his room all day. He drew the curtains, turned off his phone, and lay on his bed like an abandoned corpse. He didn't understand what he had felt during the ritual, and more importantly, he didn't understand what he had seen. But he didn't want to think about it. Not yet. He finally drifted off to sleep. When he woke up, his throat was parched, his eyelids heavy. He looked for his phone in his backpack. As he opened the pocket, he froze. A stack of money was placed neatly inside. Perfect, flat, brand new. $10,000. He had no memory of putting it there. He was certain the backpack had been empty last night. They all thought it was a miracle. 3 days after the ritual, they met again in Leo's basement. No one was smiling. Their eyes avoided each other. The atmosphere had changed. Leo placed an envelope on the floor. "I found this money under my counter." No one came back for it. Caleb winced. He rummaged through his backpack, pulled out the stack of cash, and placed it in the middle. "I found this in my stuff. Money I never put there. I don't know where it came from." They turned to Ethan. He slowly took out the old iron box. He opened it, revealing the stacks of money inside. "On my bookshelf in a box of my father's. It's been missing for 10 years. There was never any money in it. I'm sure of it." A heavy silence fell over them. Leo lowered his voice. "What does all this mean? The ritual? It worked." "It seems so." Ethan set his eyes on the iron box on the floor. They looked at each other. Leo shrugged. "Let's not ask for more. Let's just keep quiet. Stay out of trouble and enjoy it." Ethan nodded. "As long as we don't cross any lines, we can control this." Caleb said nothing. He stared at the floor, his face emotionless, his jaw clenched. He hadn't looked up since he arrived. Leo glanced at him. "Caleb, what do you think?" Still no word. "Do you think we should be worried, huh? That this is dangerous?" Caleb finally raised his head. His eyes seemed deeper, darker. "I don't know," he said simply. The ritual had taken place less than a week ago, but for Caleb, Leo, and Ethan, time had taken on a different shape. The days no longer had the same flavor. Something had been opened, and now nothing could protect them. A few days later, Caleb became tense, paranoid. He locked his door, checking it over and over. He would stay in his room for days on end, huddled in a corner, a notebook open on his lap. He wrote meaningless sentences, numbers, strange symbols. "I am no longer one, I am two. It thinks when I sleep, it watches me from the inside." He repeated those phrases over and over. As for Leo, he tried to convince himself that everything was fine. He had money. He finally had it. He replaced his old sneakers, wore a new shirt. He smiled at his neighbors. But one evening when Leo returned home, he found the rope from the ritual laid neatly on his bed. He was sure he had burned it after the ceremony. He was certain of it. He had seen it turn to ash. He touched it. It was cold. But it vibrated faintly as if there was a weak pulse inside. He threw it in the trash. It reappeared. It followed him like an invisible bond he couldn't sever. One night he woke up to find it wrapped around his wrist. And on the wall a sentence was written in what looked like mud, which he had no idea how it got there. "You have taken what is not yours." He didn't dare to sleep anymore. He spent his nights sitting in a chair, the rope in his hands, staring at it as if he wanted to talk to it. And sometimes it would vibrate as if it were breathing. One night he stood up, threw open the window, and screamed into the void. "What do you want? We respected the rules." But there was no answer but the silence of the night. One night, Ethan fell asleep as usual, a little tired. But when he woke up, he was in the backyard. Barefoot, his eyes burning. The sun hadn't risen. It was still pitch black. His palms were covered in dirt, and most importantly, he remembered nothing. He was alone. He staggered back into his room and collapsed onto his bed. One evening, Caleb called Leo and Ethan. His voice was weak, tired. "We need to talk." They met again in the basement. But this time the silence had changed shape. Caleb was trembling. "I did something stupid," he whispered. Leo frowned. Ethan barely lifted his head. During the ritual, I opened my eyes. The other two stared at him. Something was close to my face, a breath. I was scared. I only looked for a second. I didn't mean to. Leo jumped to his feet. "What? But we said not to open our eyes until the end." Caleb began to sob. "I'm sorry. I think I let something else through, something that wasn't part of the deal. And now it won't leave," he choked out. Ethan stood up, his eyes dark, and whispered, "So that's why I go to sleep in my room and wake up somewhere else." He moved closer to Caleb. "You betrayed us." Caleb didn't answer. He just trembled. He didn't seem to be fully there anymore. Leo stepped between them. "No, we'll figure this out. We'll find a solution." But Ethan was already looking at the door. "No, it's too late," he said, his voice ice cold. "It broke the promise." He walked out of the room with decisive steps and went home, his jaw clenched as if he had heard a voice the others could not perceive. 3 days later, Caleb stood in his room muttering nonsensical phrases. "The fire is cold. The mirror eats the rope dances. It's dancing. It's dancing." He suddenly bolted from his house, stumbling down the sidewalk, repeating the same phrases to passers-by who tried to avoid him. An elderly neighbor happened to walk by. "Caleb, are you all right?" He stared at her for a long moment, then let out a dry, choked laugh. "Don't you see it? It's dancing right there on your shadow." He swung his arm violently at the empty air. The woman screamed and ran away. Caleb chased her for a short distance before turning into an alley and never coming back. Madness had consumed him. The next evening, Sarah Ethan's sister was chopping vegetables in their small kitchen to prepare dinner. She hummed a cheerful tune. Ethan was in his room. Suddenly, a heavy invisible pressure descended upon the room. Ethan felt something enter his body. Not an emotion, but a force, a presence. His fingers clenched. Then he stood up without a hint of hesitation. He walked towards the kitchen. Sarah, her back turned, didn't hear him enter. Ethan advanced, guided by another force. His hands were no longer his own. His thoughts had vanished. He saw the vegetable knife on the cutting board, picked it up, moved closer, and without a word stabbed her hard in the back. Once, twice. She collapsed, her eyes empty, her breath choked. That was when Ethan came to his senses. His hands trembled, his breathing ragged. He looked at the knife, the pool of blood, the still body of his sister. "No, no, no, no. What have I done?" He backed away, the floor tilting beneath him. The world seemed to be dissolving. He fled the house and ran into the night. 5 days had passed since Ethan had killed his sister and disappeared into the darkness. And since then, a silence had fallen over Leo's basement. He no longer went out. He just sat there on his mattress, his eyes wide open as if waiting for an answer that would never come. In his mind, the same questions repeated over and over. How did we get to this point? Why did Caleb go mad and Ethan? Why a murder? He saw the image of the three of them again sitting in front of the laptop at the beginning. The laughter, the dreams of easy money, the innocence. They were just 3 young men. 3 young men who were too curious, too poor, too impatient. Leo lay there, his gaze lost on the cracks in the ceiling. When he sat up, he saw the rope on the chair, the very rope he had tried in vain to burn. He slowly stood up. He felt a pressure in his chest, and as if pushed by an invisible hand, he walked towards the rope. He picked it up. He placed the chair in the middle of the room and climbed onto it. He took the rope, calmly wrapped one end around a metal ceiling beam, then looped the other end around his neck. Then he kicked the chair away. He was found 2 days later. Neighbors, alarmed by the smell and the flies, had called the police. The basement door was locked from the inside. "He was a good kid," one of them said. "Always quiet, polite. I heard he even graduated from college with honors." A few days later, Ethan turned himself in. At the police station, he did not deny his guilt. He recounted everything, the ritual, the money, and then the black void in his memory. He said he remembered nothing of the moment he killed his sister. It was like someone else was walking around inside my body. It wasn't me who killed Sarah. It was the thing we woke up that night. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Engaging in occult or demonic practices always carries serious risks. Just because it promises you money doesn't mean it won't take your soul. When life seems unfair, do not choose darkness for revenge, because some shortcuts lead directly to destruction, and you will never be able to return whole.